Hi, my name's Jordan Marshall and I'm Special Projects Editor at Building Magazine. I'm really pleased to be involved in this final session of our Construction Cybersecurity Forum today. It's another great one. This one we're really pleased to be working with NCC Group to put on for you, and it's all about how construction firms can set up best-in-class cybersecurity systems. I've got a great panel for you, Tim Rollins and Rob Van from NCC Group, who'll run you through all the particulars. But before we get to them, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. Please send through your questions as they come. We'll try and get as many of them answered as possible for you. But we're really keen to have you get involved in the conversation. So please do that. That would be wonderful. Secondly, I'd just love to say that it'd be great to have as many of you at the end of the answer our survey. It's really quick, literally 30 seconds. It's just to get your feedback on our events so we can make sure that we're delivering the best events possible for our audience. Excellent. I will now hand over to Tim and Rob, who will take you through the presentation before we get back into the Q&A.
Jordan, thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the briefing by NCC Group. For those of you that don't know us, we are a UK-based cybersecurity company. We have a global presence, a global footprint. We're about 2,500 strong, and we deliver basically everything and anything to do with cybersecurity, literally from advising companies how to manage crisis management issues around cybersecurity, all the way through to deep technical cryptographic analysis and everything in between. So the idea today is just to give you an introduction to some of the ideas and concepts, the challenges that we see as a cybersecurity company that works with over 1,400 clients, 14,000 clients, of course, sorry, globally. So Rob and I will be splitting the presentation between us. Some of it, may be familiar if you've been attending the earlier sessions by our colleagues at Bayes and NCSC, with whom we work very closely on a wide variety of topics. But the idea is to really help you understand, help you get this idea of what it is that would make a first-class cybersecurity system, focusing particularly on your industry, the construction industry. So as Jordan mentioned earlier, please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box and we will pick those up at the end. So thank you very much. We'll kick off. Rob, next slide, please. One of the things that we wanted to make clear is that really anybody can be a target for a cybersecurity attack. We often talk to boards and executives and get this sort of first response when they've been hit about is, well, why would they go after us? What is it about us? I was doing one cyber incident response where it was a coffee company, and they were like, we just do coffee. Why on earth would anybody have any interest in attacking us? And I had to explain to the CEO that actually the bad guys and girls out there, the criminals and the organized crime gangs, they don't care who they go after. They really don't care. But they have this attitude that you have something they want, mostly money, but secondly, it's data. They want information, and they know that if they can steal your information, then they're in a position to be able to hold it to ransom. They're in a position to be able to demand, from you a payment in order to not release it, not to publicize it. But also they can sell that information on to other crime gangs, other criminals. So honestly, just because you are a small house builder, you are a small manufacturer within the sector, a small supplier, it really doesn't matter. There's a simple shorthand, which is if it's of use to you, if it's of value to you, then it's probably of value to somebody else. And that's the sort of thing that we want to you to have in mind. You as an individual, you as an organization are likely to be targeted by organized crime gangs at some stage. Now, there are other people that do cyber attacks. And I know NCSC mentioned them earlier around, this whole ecosystem of crime gangs, activists, state actors, the media, all sorts of people might do it. But for the majority of effort, it's going to be by the organized crime gangs out to try and get information or money from you. So How do organizations respond? Let's move on to the next slide, please. The challenge for most organizations are that they really haven't woken up to the cyber threat. You would have thought by now most organizations had really got a grip of this. But to be honest, time and time again, when we're talking to senior executives, boards, owners, whatever they are, we still see these common cyber-related business risks. And it's that, looking at this list, a lack of engagement and budget from senior management. There is no way that if you're a chief information security officer or you're just the one-man IT band who does everything, there's a very good chance you're not getting the level of support, the level of resources that you need in order to deliver a really safe and secure environment. And if you do get those resources, the attitude that we see time and time again is that, well, it's an IT problem. Why isn't IT solving it? And the challenge is really that cyber is a people, process, and technology problem. And actually, those three elements all working together are absolutely essential for good cybersecurity and operational resilience. You're not going to find a single solution that does everything, despite the salesman's efforts to convince you otherwise. There really is no one magic bullet that will solve all of your cybersecurity issues. It is only by combining the good practice and the knowledge and experience of the people that you have working for you that you will be able to blend those things together to be able to deliver a more resilient organization. And talking of resilience, we've got to change that mindset from, well, we'll just build a bigger fence, we'll put a bigger barrier around our stuff, to actually resilience as a whole concept. And resilience is really your ability to deliver a business service. And that's what we need to be focused on. What do you need to deliver that business service? And how will you manage to deliver that business service when, for example, you've lost your IT, that you can't get access to your voice over IP phone system, when your backups have been corrupted? All of those different issues that are part of your operational activity. To be honest, you've got to have moved beyond this. Well, we've just got good antivirus. We've just got one good thing that looks after us. To really thinking about operational resilience, how you are going to deliver that business service, how you can defend it, how you can manage it, and how, when the dreadful event happens and you are targeted, you do suffer, that you are able to think about how your business continuity plans will kick in and you can deliver that business service, which may need to be done for an extended period of time without IT. If those of you that might be aware of the attack against the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, a government department based in Scotland, was targeted by a ransomware gang. They were hit with ransomware on Christmas Eve a couple of years ago. It took them a significant period of time. Not the 4 hours that are mentioned in most business continuity plans, or 4 days, or even just 4 months. Literally, it took them over 12 months to get their entire estate back together and operational. And even then, there were still elements of it that they decided not to bring back up online, as they decided they would incorporate a move into new technologies. So thinking about that resilience over the longer term is absolutely essential. And of course, the lack of security and data privacy culture is one of those challenges that most organizations face. And if they can't get their senior management to really accept it, to walk the talk, and really set that tone from the top of the organization, then it's almost impossible for anybody beneath them to actually give a real focus to cybersecurity. And those are challenges that literally we see every day across organizations large and small. So at least by listening to this presentation and getting engaged, you are making a change, you're making a difference. So please, please, please think about these issues and think about how you might make that change. And the next slide, please, Rob.
Thanks, Tim. And I think
hand over to Robin.
Thanks, Tim. Hello, guys. Nice to speak to you. I think from my side, I've worked in cyber for most of my career, and I've been a frontline incident responder for a significant part of that. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit today from the sort of zoomed in view of construction as a world and some of the challenges that I've seen and some of the things you can do about them as well. But I wanted to start by telling you the first half of my two cautionary tales. Um, this particular incident was a large construction company, non-UK, so not someone on your doorstep, but actually I received an email that looked a little bit like this, and apologies for all the black boxes. But basically, not unfamiliar. We see a lot of these. It's from Proton Mail, so fairly anonymous. It's purporting to be a security mail, and it's asking for Bitcoin to not release this data out into the world. And of course, this particular one was the first email, and everyone ignored it because there's no evidence and no proof. And then over the next 4 hours or so, 18 more emails arrived, gradually increasing prices, becoming more threatening. And as part of that, there was a number of pieces of information that appeared to show client names from major contracts, folder structures, all that other good stuff. And at that point, people started to frankly panic. And when they start to panic, generally they end up talking to someone like myself. And we'll come back to this one at the end of the presentation. That's the first half of the first tale. And then I want to take a completely different environment, a small materials supplier, hit by ransomware, and the actual impact that created. Because just to start with, it was one machine, and the person was a little concerned but didn't really do anything, and then it spread, and they couldn't take any orders because the website was down, it's ransomware. The phone was down, it was ransomware. The email was down, it was ransomware. Kind of get bored of this, but you get the picture. They couldn't deliver anything because you know what? Their logistics and their point of sale stuff was ransomware. And they couldn't even outsource it to someone else because their electronic payments were ransomware. So in the space of less than 24 hours, they went from impact, which we discovered later, followed by one machine down, followed by their entire business halted. And we'll come back to these cautionary tales at the end of the presentation and talk a little bit about what they meant and what they were. But I'm going to hand you back to Tim now to talk a little bit more about ransomware and data exfiltration and how those pieces tie together.
Thanks, Robin. So ransomware is often talked about, but actually, unless you've been involved in it, unless you've had it explained, it can be a bit of a mystery. So I just wanted to very briefly talk you through how ransomware actually works. Well, it starts over on the left-hand side by the evil baddies, compromising the network, compromising your network, your systems, your technology. And they're normally done either through a phishing email, i.e. you've actually clicked on a link, you've given away information, potentially a username and a password that has enabled the bad guys to log in, or they've compromised it through what we call a technical vulnerability, i.e. there's a problem with your security and somebody has managed to actually, Rob, can you go on mute for a second? Sorry, just beginning extra noise. So they compromise the vulnerability, so they effectively get into your network. Once they've got in, either using a legitimate password or they've exploited a vulnerability, they then what's called establish remote command and control. This is effectively enables them to get into your network and maintain a presence on your network from wherever they're operating. And they won't just do this directly. They will do it by bouncing around the internet. They'll be using different methods and techniques to hide how they're getting in and where they're getting in from. So they'll make it difficult for anybody to track them back. But with that remote command and control, they'll then look to move around the network, move across it, and move to what's called elevate or escalate their privileges. Now, this might be that they become an administrator, so one of your system or network administrators, even a domain administrator, or it might be that they will try and take over the account of somebody who has, for example, better access or greater sign-off. So maybe for those of you within a bigger firm, it might be getting access to an HR director's account and using that level of access to get into HR records. They might also try and become your chief financial officer or your head of finance, whatever they're called, or procurement, all areas where access might be better. They might have bigger sign-off, they might have greater knowledge of what's going on. Their emails might be more interesting. So they've escalated their privileges and they can see what's happening across your network. Then what we started to see is the corruption of backups. Now, traditionally with ransomware, once your system had gone down, once it had been compromised, the only way of getting it back was either to pay the ransom or to use your backups, which of course I hope you're taking on a regular basis. Now, if the bad guys can get into the system and turn off the backup system, if they can actually corrupt or encrypt the backups themselves, then they've taken away one of your lines of recovery, which is absolutely key to the continuation of your organization. Once they've had a go at your backups, they're then looking more or increasingly to actually steal the data. So what they're doing is, before they run encryption, they will try and grab a large chunk of data. It might be information from your file service, it might be emails, and take that out of the system, exfiltrate it, and store it themselves. What this does is it increases the pressure on you to respond to them when they eventually run the ransomware software. And what that does is encrypt individual computers, networks, file shares, anywhere where you've got information and got data, they will try and lock it up. Then what they do is they'll start to contact people. Now, this could be a pop-up on the screen. It might just be a box going, you've been ransomwared, as we saw on one of those previous ones. You're going to need to pay us in order to get the key and to unlock it. If the firm is starting to look at it but is not responding as much as they'd like, they may then start to contact ordinary members of staff. And we've certainly seen this where staff have been contacted over WhatsApp using a burner phone or a disposable telephone number, or a VoIP number, for example, but them receiving messages saying, your company is not responding. We will be releasing your data. Now is not the time to have your personal information floating around the internet. So what are you doing to put them under pressure to pay the ransom? So they're going and releasing that sort of information, not just to staff, but also to suppliers and to the media, to try and put pressure on your firm to pay out. So unfortunately, if you do pay out, there is absolutely no guarantee that either the data that they've stolen will actually be returned and that they won't have taken a copy of it, or the fact that the key will actually work and will be able to unlock the information that they've locked up. So, to be honest, there is no honor amongst thieves, and there is no guarantee that paying a ransom will get it back. Now, there are some issues around paying ransoms, and we generally describe these as the 3 E's. There's the ethical idea. Is it ethical for your firm, for your organization, to be paying a ransom to organized criminals? Now, for a lot of government departments and charities, they've already taken that decision. They're not going to pay. They are not going to sponsor this organized crime activity, this criminal activity. So they've taken the decision, an ethical decision, we will not pay. There is often in organizations a concept of existential. So we won't pay unless we think that this is an existential issue, and then if we don't pay, our organization is going to collapse. because our backups have been corrupted, we've got nothing to rely on. We honestly can't operate. So actually, we're going to break our ethical decision and we're going to pay out. So that's the exceptional. So that's the existential issue. And then there is the exception. And the exception is if paying the ransom would actually be breaking the law. And quite often paying a ransom isn't technically illegal unless the organization that you are paying has been sanctioned. Now, we've all heard about sanctions very recently with the invasion by the Russia of the Ukraine. And we've seen a number of organizations being sanctioned as a result of that. But there is already a long list of organizations, exchanges, individuals, and groups who are sanctioned, which means paying any ransom to those groups is actually illegal. So when you're thinking about ransom, think about those 3 E's: the ethical question, the existential question, and the exception, and whether or not you would want to be able to pay out to criminals should you hit by ransomware. Far better is to be prepared, to be resilient, and to be able to deal with this incident. And we'll talk about that a bit later on. Robin.
Thank you, Tim. I think you've elegantly covered off this slide in your introduction, which is great. I think really for me, the transition from technical control concerns through to true business impact, from business interruption right down to safety and loss of life, has really been a big driver in thinking in a number of industries that have a high level of maturity. And I think moving that piece away from a technology problem is absolutely critical for dealing with it. I think if we start to look at what does good look like, building a strategy and then implementing and reviewing that strategy, continuously iterating and improving is it's kind of key to achieving good. And then, and then putting effective technical controls in place that enable that to be enforced and measured, and driving education and test and evidence to prove that it's happening, and monitoring and response, because when the worst does happen, that's the key to being able to respond quickly, effectively, and with the minimum of disruption. That's all good, right? Okay, everything works on PowerPoint and boxes are fantastic. But what controls start to get you there? I think moving into a minimum of multi-factor with strong authentication takes you to that first level. Driving a really strong awareness training and testing to make sure that people are familiar with the tricks of the trade, but also they know what to do and where to go and how to get support. And obviously the basic controls of anti-malware, patching and vulnerability awareness to make sure systems are as robust and as defended as you can. And as Tim says, we've really seen a huge increase in the desire to disrupt, corrupt, maliciously alter backups. So building backups that are both offline and that provide some form of immutability, so they can't be changed, it is really important. And kind of 3 backups, 2 different systems, one of which is offline all the time, is a really good way to approach that. And then looking at how do you build a strong policy for endpoints, particularly since the world became more remote, and as we put it together, how do you understand where that endpoint is, what it's doing, and what it's able to have installed on it in terms of removable media, but also in terms of software, etc. Really starts to build that strong and robust approach. And then looking at the core of the network and the Wi-Fi and how things are connecting, and making sure those are secured effectively and appropriately. And I guess the emerging piece around data and understanding the value of data and where it resides and how it transmits and where it sends is particularly appropriate to the construction industry, because you guys have a lot of data and you tend to share it a lot between partnerships and cooperation. Really starts to build out that good control network that says this is how we start to address that business resilience that Tim was talking about earlier. And I worked with a fair number of construction firms and people in the construction industry over the years. And I think when I first started, I quite often rocked up with a slide deck that was similar to the one you just saw and said, this is what we need to do. And consistently, I then learned about construction and how it all fit together. And I think there's some quite common pieces that I've found in working with the construction industry that really drive some differences in approach. And for me, I guess the first one is everybody is partnering and cooperating with everyone else, and that cooperation piece is massive in the construction industry, and it's not even clearly defined who's the lead in the consortium all the time. Those things flex and change, so it's quite hard to build and control access to data and systems that is consistent across environments that you don't control and that you don't even control access to in some cases. I think you guys are blessed with a large number of legacy systems, at least in my experience. I find a lot of the requirements for collaborating on designs that perhaps take many years to execute, etc., means that legacy systems are needed, and as such, the controls around them have to be quite robust, and the risk has to be understood. The convergence of IT and OT leads to some amazing things. I think I've worked on some really good, smart industrial projects, and I love the way that world works. But it does bring a number of challenges to particularly construction around things like a lot of uncontrolled devices and unknown devices operating in those transient networks that exist so much. And that leads us nicely into that health and safety piece. Again, Tim just talked about the ethical approach, and at what point does safety and protection of life. I talk a lot to people about how you build kill switches between IT and OT, and how you should think very carefully before you throw them, because if you throw those kill switches and you lose access to your health and safety monitoring systems on a critical piece of equipment, then have you breached your health and safety requirements? It's a really interesting conversation, and it's one that the simplification of IT and OT converging really needs to consider both availability but also safety and how that interacts. And I also find that you guys have a whole load of remote sites and transient sites, and those remote and transient sites, in much the same way as everyone's a partner, everybody goes to them, and really the physical control is often pretty good, but the control of networks and the control of the security of data is often less good, and the access needs to go back to pull down plans and documentation and work orders and agreements and all those other good things. So you've got these constantly moving remote sites that you need to figure out how to secure, when the people going into and out of them are often carrying ID and approvals, but perhaps they're connecting BYOD devices, perhaps they're working on their phone, and it really builds a fairly unique set of challenges. And I think the final one I observe is that there isn't a massive amount of money for security very often. So you've got all those really difficult problems underpinned by not having a massive pile of cash to pay for it. So you've got to build that appropriate and effective strategy to put it together. And for me, if we start to look at what you can perhaps do about these things, I'm a big fan of treating every partnership as untrusted, segmenting areas that you can't validate, and monitoring, even if you can't deny access or authorize access, monitor for signs of malicious behavior, unexpected behavior, deviations from the norm of what you expect from that person coming in. And particularly when you need to do things like privileged access, making sure that that's controlled through workflows and there's appropriate governance and approvals. Do upgrade those legacy systems where you can. I'm very aware that You can't always upgrade them, but where you can't, put them somewhere else, and again, monitor obsessively. You see, I'm quite obsessive about monitoring. I make no apology for that. But segregating the exceptions and understanding where they are is absolutely critical. Health and safety, my top piece of advice is don't go to jail. Monitor obsessively, keep an eye on the systems, understand the routes through the network, and look at the ways in which you can support those systems through IT, not impact them. And you can see my pattern again. Don't trust any sites. Segment them, send the routes out to where they have to go. Don't connect them to existing systems. Don't build bridges between them and corporate networks. Build the routes to the data that you have to have, and monitor those routes for deviations. And because you don't have that never-ending budget, focus the security that you have directly at the biggest risks. So work hard to understand where those risks come from for your particular part of the industry, and then direct your security at risk. I am a massive fan of monitoring, and I include good into this piece to give me that ability to say pervasive monitoring, active response support is what you need in construction because of the diversity of your environment, because of some of those unique challenges. You do need to do the basics well, but you also need to monitor and look for deviations from the norm and signs of malicious behavior that drive you to fast and effective responses before impact. And I guess for me, that's the key to this, is you need to be understanding and predicting those impacts and working to remediate them before they happen. And monitoring is the best way that you can achieve that. I want to finish off by just closing out on the cautionary tales. And this particular client, in the first instance, wanted to pay the ransom. My favorite comment almost ever, I think, that any client has ever said to me was this particular client said, "It's only $850,000. Why don't we just pay?" Which again was an exciting thing to have to deal with. But when we pared it down, this set alarm bells ringing for me because there was so much contact in such a short space of time. So we pulled all the data, we looked at the evidence, and we found something very interesting, which was there was no access. What had happened, we believe, was two things. Someone had taken a photo of someone's machine in a coffee shop or whatever, and had taken a screenshot, and they'd gone through the announcements in the press for this particular company, pulling out the companies they'd worked with, and then created directories underneath it and made it look like a screenshot. And where they'd cut and pasted this one screenshot, we assembled it back from those 12 or 13 emails that had screenshots in them and assembled the whole screen. Again, very, very clever, very smart, but there was nothing there, nothing at all. And panic drove people to say, let's pay the ransom. In that second instance, the client wanted to pay the ransom. There's a kind of pattern here, as you can see. Again, we advised against it. This was quite a big business impact, and you could understand that they wanted to to get back to business. But I think common misconception is they magically give you the key and you type it in, and then your files come back and everything's great again. Even where people choose to pay the ransom, they very rarely get all of their data back, and they very rarely get it in a timely fashion. So from my side, the first thing that we did was we asked for evidence that these files existed and could be decrypted. They couldn't. They couldn't supply us with a decryption key. They couldn't supply us with any evidence that they could decrypt the files. And that meant, again, there was no chance to get these files back. So I guess my cautionary tales are: don't panic, prepare, test, evidence, assure, and bring yourselves to the point at which you know what you are going to do, you've planned it, you've done scenarios, you've built it, and you've said, this is our course of actions, rather than panicking, because these people construct and design their messaging to ramp up the pressure and to get what they want. So please do prepare. I think I'm going to hand you back to Tim now to cover off the summary.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you found this session interesting. The advice that we would suggest are, you are both at threat on a general level, in as much as all organizations hold information of value to you, so therefore it's going to be of value to somebody else. There are some particular issues that Robin has highlighted where you have particular challenges. You're an industry that has a lot of suppliers and subbies all the way down that chain within the construction world. So there is a lot of opportunity for data to be lost, misconstrued, or otherwise corrupted. So the solution has got to be find an expert partner. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you've got to come to us, but please, please, please organize that you have a response capability, that somebody is ready and waiting on the sidelines to step in and help you. It might be that you decide to go down the line of cyber insurance and you're going to rely on one of their people to do it. It might be that you have cyber insurance if you can afford it, but you'll also want to have another company on retainer. And if you come to somebody like us, we can provide a range of services. So not only do we help you with the forensic side of that, we can help you with the advice and guidance that your board is going to need. We can introduce you to everybody from law firms who've got experience in this area, through to data miners who will be able to help you understand what data has actually been taken or stolen. But whatever it is, we can help, whether it's on the PR front or the legal front, the comms front, whatever it is. Get an expert partner and have them on standby. As NCSC will have said, it's do your cyber hygiene. So please, if you haven't already looked through the list of advice from the National Cybersecurity Centre, please do so. The 10 steps, excellent way of ensuring that your organization is better prepared and more resilient. But then once you have done the basics, we really want you to look at what is key to your organization, what is absolutely key to your operational resilience, what's key to the delivery of your business services, and make sure that those are the elements where you have focused your attention and that you have sufficient policies, procedures, training in place to make sure that it's always going to be available to you no matter what the bad guys get up to. Prepare for it, test and train. So train your people, put them through some exercises, put them through that dry run. I've done it, and I do this on a very regular basis with organizations large and small. We run tabletop exercises or scenarios to help people think through the unthinkable, to prepare them, to help them build up that muscle memory so that they're ready to respond when, and we always say when, not if, something happens, and they're going to need to be able to respond. It's far better to have done it in a nice, safe environment without the stress of a real incident, to make sure that you have done your stakeholder mapping. Because I can assure you that the stakeholders in any organization are actually far more extensive than you know. We did one exercise recently. On the back of it, the firm went away and did some additional work, and they came back to me and said, Tim, we've identified another 30 organizations that we need to have regular contact with if we have a cyber incident. So think about that. Think about your preparation and exercising so that you're ready, you've developed that muscle memory, and you're able to respond effectively. And as everyone has got here, don't panic. You need that calm moment of reflection where you think through what has actually happened. It's just as much, a post-incident, when something bad has happened, you've still got to be able to take a breath. Don't leap into it. Don't do as one major firm we were working with, when they were attacked, they decided to shut down their major server, which was great, except for the fact that it then destroyed, in shutting it down, it destroyed all of the evidence that we needed in order to be able to investigate properly. But it was a response in the moment by somebody who was not trained and not experienced. And of course, it was the wrong thing to do. So there's lots of advice there. We would be more than happy to talk to you on an individual basis, to come through and have a conversation. It's what we do all the time. But if you have any questions that you want answered now, please, if you haven't already put them in the question elements of the system, please put them in now, and we'll endeavour to answer them as the questions come up. So can we see the first question, please?
Absolutely, we can start jumping into things right now. I'd just like to say thank you so much for such an insightful session so far. I've really enjoyed it, and I can tell the audience has been too. We've had the first question that I'm going to put to you guys is probably just particularly pertinent off the back of that last comment about keeping your cool. And it's, why are clients so keen to pay ransoms? Is that just that initial panic, or is it, you know, something more inherent?
I think it is that initial panic. I think there is the thought that, oh my goodness, we're going to have to pay in order to get operational again. And it's firms that really haven't done the preparation, that haven't done the exercising, haven't taken the opportunity to think things through, that do that, oh my goodness, we're going to have to pay because there's no other solution. If you have thought about your systems, if you have good offline backups, and by good, I mean, you know, recent, tested, you know they work, you've actually done it, you've rebuilt from those in the past, and you know that you can rely on them, then actually you can think about not paying that ransom. But it's that immediate response. And we would always suggest, no, stop and talk to somebody like us, talk to your lawyers, talk to your advisors, and more often than not, the advice will be, don't pay, we can cope, we can deal with it, we can manage the incident properly without having to fund the criminal activity.
Brilliant. And so we've got another question coming in here from the audience, which asks, what recommendations or examples can you provide around strengthening our supply chain? We've seen this has been the source of many incidents and are obviously concerned.
Yeah, supply chain and the threat of supply chain attacks has really significantly increased in the last couple of years. You know, you'll have heard, if you're not a specialist in this area, you may even have heard of things like, you know, SolarWinds and Log4j and all of these other things where a supply chain has been compromised in some way, shape or form. So it is difficult. What we would suggest is start with your data mapping. Find out who are your key suppliers. Find out who are your key sources, and by key suppliers, it means it's not, you know, who's delivering the latest delivery of concrete, but think about your data. Where is the information coming in and out of your network? And it's those ones where you need to focus your attention. When I started the process at a bank I worked for, we looked at our supply chain. And our initial cut of suppliers was that we had 136,000 suppliers globally. Now, obviously a ridiculous number and not one that you could focus on. And what we did is we went through that number and we got rid of everybody who we hadn't paid in the last 2 years. We then looked at who was getting or giving us data, and we looked at them. And who was providing us with a service, particularly software as a service. And we looked to ensure that those people were, for example, putting their software into what's called escrow, so that if they went bust, if they were unable to deliver a service, we could get access to the source code for that software. And we could ensure that we could continue to use the software even without them. So you look at the supply chain, you really focus on where the information is going to and fro, and that's where you concentrate your investigations. That's where you concentrate your discussions with them, asking them, what are they doing about their own cybersecurity? How are they ensuring their resilience, their ability to deliver to you the business service that you're reliant on? And it's that collaborative working that is absolutely key to ensuring better cybersecurity across the entire ecosystem.
I'd add to that, you, particularly for smaller suppliers, contractually obligating them to tell you if they have a breach or if they've experienced a breach. really being forewarned is forearmed. So actually bolting that into your agreements means that at least you're warned if something does happen to them, potentially before it happens to you as well.
No, absolutely. That sounds really wise. One of the questions we had earlier that I was hoping to put to you, and it's partially been covered already in your session, but I just be interested to hear your thoughts. We've sort of asked if there was any particular areas construction firms should be watching out for in particular. Is there any particular types of threat? Is there anything specific that they should be looking out for?
I think from my experience, I would say the shared information platforms are often targets, because the way accounts are provisioned and identities are managed on those platforms seems to be quite a consistent place of attack. So I think if you are doing those kind of shared information environments, please be careful how you're provisioning, that you're authorizing people correctly and putting them together, because that seems to be a very common way to get access. Tim?
Yep, I would say that as you design, build, and hand over, think about cybersecurity at each stage. So thinking about how you may be compromised, thinking about how you may be part of a supply chain that might end up compromising somebody else. I know there was a very large scale piece of construction where we were giving advice. We went in and discovered that all of the air conditioning units and the HVAC systems on this particular project were enormous and manifold across multiple sites. They had all been left with their initial password, username and password, and it was the classic admin. Every single machine was vulnerable to being either corrupted, hit with ransomware, turned on or off, whatever the bad guys wanted to do, because nobody had thought about it in the process. So please, 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 every stage, think about what you're doing and think about cybersecurity as an element of that to reduce the impact of any attack on the sector as a whole. It's not good enough that you hand over a piece of kit where no thought has been given to cybersecurity. So whether it's your big yellow diggers on your site or it's stuff that you're handing over to other people, having completed a site, please think about the cybersecurity elements of it and apply the best practice that the National Cybersecurity Centre has advised all the way through those processes.
Absolutely. So the next question we've had come in from the audience is asking, what is the best approach for giving our clients that use our project management portal peace of mind, that it's secure and their data is safe? So this is sort of picking up on what you're just saying there. Is pen testing the best route, or should we be looking further afield?
I think to answer this, yes, of course, any system before it goes live, particularly ones that's going to have sensitive information on it, should be pen tested. We do pen testing, lots of firms do it. It's a question of engaging with somebody to introduce the concepts of security before it goes live. So that's the secure life cycle, the secure design of that portal. And then it's testing again before it goes live. And really, please, please, please build the cybersecurity element into it earlier in the process. Because too often it gets through to the, oh, we're going to go live with this new system. It's going live tomorrow. By the way, can you test it for us? It's too late at that stage. It really is. So do the training, get your the developers to develop it securely, and then, of course, test it before it goes live, because it's going to be your reputation on the line, your data, the client's data. So you need to think about making sure that you've put the process in place. And this is where I talked about earlier on. It's not just the technology, it's the people, the process, and the technology that needs to work together to secure it. So think of all those three elements before you introduce anything like a portal that could potentially give away really important and sensitive client data.
Absolutely. I had another question come in asking, as well as ISO 27001, is there a recognised cybersecurity standard firms should be accredited to?
There are lots of different standards. ISO 27001 is a great one to do. But to be frank, it's only looking at the controls. So it still doesn't mean that a company that's got ISO 27001 will be entirely cyber secure. It just means they've started their thinking. They're on a journey to better cybersecurity, and they will need to combine the controls that are audited in 27001 with those other things. The people that, they've got the processes right, absolutely. If they've been audited and they've done it, they still need to think about how are they monitoring their network. They still need to have that response capability, that managed detection and response, which will enable the organization to respond to the attack when it comes. So, yes, there are lots of different ones. There's a huge range, including those that affect the OT elements. But I think it's better, or probably be better, to talk to individuals, and we can bring our specialists in when people are interested in the different standards.
With that mention of OT, that was a question that I briefly wanted to ask. How much is that of an increasing concern for construction firms? Obviously, the OT aspect of cybersecurity.
OT is an increasing problem. The challenges around it are that traditionally it's been legacy kit. So it's older stuff where people have then bolted on that internet access, that connectivity. Oftentimes it's sweated assets, so it's older equipment, it's older assets that are sort of further down their life cycle. And the problem is, as long as they're around, the longer they're around, the more vulnerable they are to people having attempted and targeting them and hacking at them. So just a few weeks ago, we saw some of the Siemens UPS systems being hit with a significant vulnerability. The vulnerability would have enabled somebody from the outside to basically take control of a Siemens UPS, which once you've got that control, there's a very good chance that you would be able to jump from the OT network into the IT environment. And they would have been able to control things like the phasing, the power outage, or the power output from the UPSs. So your OT is increasingly vulnerable. It is being targeted more. It's more difficult and more challenging to do that monitoring, detection and response because, frankly, it wasn't designed, it wasn't built with cybersecurity in mind. Even now, it's much harder to monitor. We can do it. More and more organizations are looking at how they can do it in order to increase their security. But when you've got OT that's been built with a layer of IT on it, we also see that oftentimes that falls to a different department. The different organizations or different elements within the organization are responsible for the OT systems. And so where there is IT layered on top, that's being managed by the OT people as well. So it doesn't meet the standards, it doesn't get the patching, the looking after that it really should have, the identification of vulnerabilities, and therefore, again, it becomes increasingly vulnerable to attack. So it's a problem. It's one that we've certainly seen across the construction industry.
Absolutely. Okay, brilliant. Something that I wanted to touch on, because it's been raised at, in cyber sessions that we've done, is that, and you mentioned about people training and that, like the significance of that. Something that we often get asked, told is that, firms view their people as almost the weakest point from a cyber perspective. Human error is like a really hard thing to stamp out. Do you have sort of advice for firms to make sure they've got the proper training and have everybody doing the right thing?
Yes, I hate the phrase that humans are the weakest link, because actually they're your last line of defense. By the time it gets through to a person, it means it's evaded all of your technical controls, all of the ability that you've had to put in place other measures to deal with the threat. So don't think of them as your weakest link. Think of them as the last line of defense. So make them effective and efficient. We always advise training. We always advise awareness. And awareness is so that they know what they should and shouldn't do. We would then say training is really knowing how to use a particular piece of kit or a particular piece of software to do something. It's the awareness. And if we can make it such that people really think about cybersecurity in their personal life, then they stand a better chance of ensuring that they will use that good practice within their business life. So literally this morning, I spent an hour talking to a large group from one firm, talking to them about password managers, protecting their own email, thinking about multi-factor authentication on their own social media, thinking about what they post on social media. All of those things are aimed at the individual and making sure that they are more cyber secure, they are more aware, and therefore better positioned, better placed to support the organization as it tries to become more secure as well.
And if I could just add in that, in addition to training, I see so many companies that focus really hard on training, and making people effective really requires testing to be bolted into that training. And to me, a robust and repeated round of testing to reinforce and back up the training, together with, when people make a mistake, use it as a teachable moment to generate the right kind of learning, really pays massive dividends compared to just training on its own.
Brilliant. I'm very conscious that we're in the last couple of minutes and that we've covered a lot of ground here. And I just was really hoping that I could ask each of you to maybe give like the 3 key takeaways that you would have for the audience, so that they can, you know, walk away with the right things at the top of mind.
Okay, I'll kick off. I'll let Robin finish up, but I would suggest if you've got to manage, detect, and respond. So if you manage, you've got to know what your assets are. You've got to know who your suppliers are. You've got to know where your data is moving. You've got to know literally what IT and OT and software you're using. Because if you don't know it, you can't manage it. If you can't manage it, you can't monitor it properly. And you're then not going to be in a position to detect when there's a problem and respond when there's a problem. So manage, detect, and respond is a key element. And if you've taken the good advice from the National Cybersecurity Centre, if you've really done your cyber hygiene, do it in your personal life. So set your phone to do auto updates. Make sure you don't have one of those little numbers sitting on your settings that tells you that you haven't done something on your own phone or on your laptop, on your iPad, whatever it takes. So think about your managing, detecting, and responding to be ready. As you detect, you've got to respond, and to respond effectively, as we mentioned, you've got to have trained for it. Ideally, you'll have run exercises so that your organization knows what it's going to do when this thing happens. So manage, detect, and respond, those 3 things from me.
Brilliant.
And I'll add, because obviously Tim's taken the best ones, I'll add prepare. So really do your preparation. Test and evidence repeatedly. That Tim used the phrase muscle memory earlier on, and actually that's when incidents are handled well. And the final one for me is find a partner that you trust and can work with.
Brilliant. I think that's been such a wonderful session. Thank you so much to Robin, Tim, and NCC Group for making this possible. I know we had a lot of people who were very keen to hear about this topic, so I'm really grateful to you for your time and expertise. Just quickly from me, I wanted to put it out there because this has come through on the chat as well. Yes, this session will be available on demand, probably within about an hour of us wrapping up here. By the same link that you joined today, you'll be able to watch the session. You can share it with a colleague. You can pass it on to someone else you think needs to know all this information. It'll still be free and still be available, probably at about 4 o'clock. The only other thing that I would ask is that you take a look at the rest of our events. We've got a full program of events coming up over the next few months. They're all available on all of our sites. That's building, building design, and housing today. And also we have a brief survey that will pop up after this. Will literally take you 90 seconds tops, just to get your feedback on our events, because we want to make sure that we're putting on the best events possible for you. Thanks again, Robin and Tim, and have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.